that they basically fall into two categories. Those that are like our Earth humans, the Nordics, for instance, or other individuals who look as individuals. They may resemble each other genetically the way that one Norwegian might resemble another Norwegian, but they will have individual characteristics. These individual characteristics set their face apart from any other face, and they fall into what we categorize here at Half Past Human as fifth-order beings. Now, if we look at the gray aliens and the others of their ilk, the little gray aliens, big gray aliens, just doesn't matter. All of these beings that are claimed by Burish to be humans devolved in the future, there is a common subset that denies his claim. That common subset is the idea that each and every one of these individuals look identically the same. Now, they have a reason for this theoretically within Dan Burish's storyline, and that is that the DNA degraded to the point where basically they're all clones, and thus they are our descendant, if you will. Not descendants, not progeny, but a single individual that has been cloned repeatedly. I find this not to be credible. The reason that I find this not to be credible is that all of the gray aliens show themselves consistently to be identical to each other without the ability to have any distinguishing characteristics. The same kind of thing that we find in fourth-order beings, such as insects. If we examine a praying mantis, each and every one of the praying mantises is as though it had been cloned or stamped out of a template. They are a fourth-order being. There are many fourth-order beings here on our planet, and there are also fifth-order beings such as humans. And you will note that wherever humans get involved with life, such as breeding dogs, cats, horses, anything, we have a tendency to increase diversity, not decrease it. Also, that is the way the universe operates. When DNA degrades, as is the case right now, we're in the sixth largest extinction period in our planet's history, and it may well become the largest. It's still growing, we just don't know. But wherever these things occur, mutations are also found, and mutations cause diversity. They do not restrict diversity. So therefore, Burish's whole structure is built on some predicates that I cannot find a reason to support. This causes me to really look at a lot of his other statements. And this is at the same time that we find archetypes within Burish's context that are similar to the archetypes that we find, for instance, with this individual calling himself Dr. Deagle. Now, Dr. Deagle is an interesting character, and he is at the periphery of the consciousness world, if you will. That say that we have Project Camelot as the center of this consciousness world, and it's whirling around. It's collecting at its edge, at its fringe, some individuals which gravitate towards the center. And we see that within the Project Camelot world that the Dan Burish view, timelines, and everything is discussed as though it were reality, and no debate is really taking place on that. Some of the same archetypes that are there are also found within Deagle, and having done some background checking on these individuals with reality, I know, for instance, that those archetypes relate back to the shadow government. So thus, for instance, there is a suggestion that Deagle is indeed being paid by the CIA or whoever, NSA, whatever, the one of the shadow governments. I also think that this may be the case with Burish, and that there are some unlikely, very hard to overcome contradictions between the stuff that Burish says and what we can actually find out in reality. So at this point, I don't put much credence in it, and I think that it may be, whether he's wittingly or not doing it, he may be part of a disinformation campaign. Now, Dr. Deagle, I know, is willingly part of this whole thing in terms of what he's doing. Dan Burish, I can't say that he is an agent willingly. He just may be a dupe and may have been in a compartmentalized structure, and indeed may have worked for the black ops and the shadow government, but his level of understanding is limited, to say the best. End of statement.
Thank you very much, Cliff. This is Michael again. I'm really glad that you laid it out. I've never dared say to anybody, but maybe like a couple of friends who I really trust. And yes, I agree with what you said. Now that it's said, we've all heard it. I can only say that I agree with what you said. And as to the timelines, I have written in my own smaller book, which is the end part of the big book, that this timeline business is a straightforward disinformation. That is how the Greys would present it. That would be the only way they could logically fool mankind into believing such stories. And I have personally tried, I will add this, to explain this to Kerry Cassidy, even when Bill Ryan was not present, who clearly is her handler, and she doesn't like it when I explain these things. So that kind of ended then our cooperation there at that level. So I'm glad we made this clear now here to our friends, because our friends here are all very advanced and they know things instinctively anyway. So for the moment we have no more questions here, and we had almost 2 hours with you, and I just wanted to thank you so very much for everything, because this was really an amazing 2 hours we've had together. The last question or suggestion I have would be to kind of prompt you or ask you to say what you advise us to do given everything that we know. I mean, we all know now a lot of things together, and so what is your opinion, or what is your advice, your suggestion, what we would be well advised to do in the next, say, 4, 5, 7 months? Over.
Yes, Michael, thank you very much for the time with you, and the questions have been very good for me, very mind-stretching. I really appreciate it, especially on a cold and wet day such as we have here. For the next short term, really my advice always keeps centering down to refine yourself, but again, it's my filter as a martial artist. There may be something there, though. If you study, for instance, like Michael Sarian and a few other people, they have come to the conclusion that the yogic and martial arts may actually be a counter to something that occurred in our genetic past and may indeed be very beneficial for all individuals as well as the humanity as a whole. The issue of the Greys and their timeline stories and their lies is a very interesting one, how many people refuse to believe or disbelieve. And it's very interesting, I think, too, that the timelines and the Grey stories and their apex, their focus, is also within the Mayan calendar range and so on. Now, over the next 5 to 7 months, we can take the approach of becoming involved in the planet and so on, trying to acquire more resources to stash away, this sort of thing. All of these are probably very good things to do given the short term. But it's probably a very large waste of what I think you might agree is a unique opportunity relative to how the planets are aligned. It would seem as though the planetary alignments are supporting gnosis in the sense of action and change as a personal expression. If that's the case, then this alignment will go away sometime, I think, maybe late 2009 or 2010, early 2010. And between now and then, it just happens to be a very good time where universe is more or less saying, I give you the freedom to go on out and explore these things, and new experiences as that goes should probably be cultivated, just so that we can see that, yes, this is worth it, and no, that is not worth it. The 7 months that we've got coming relative to the powers that be in the minion class, the social structures around us, it is my personal viewpoint that it is probably best to think of this as first century China. First century China was the time where the Qin Empire had been established. The Qin king had collected, I think, 40 or 50 of the larger tribes and formed China as a whole. But it was very, very, very chaotic at the time. There were warlords. It was the beginning of the Shaolin Temple era. There were enlightened individuals coming over the mountains from India that were starting to spread Buddhism, this sort of thing. And during that period of time, it was very chaotic at a social level. But it also seems that in the midst of that terrible chaos, there was also a unique opportunity for a large number of enlightened beings to occur, or to become aware and enlightened. So I think we're at that same sort of a nexus at the moment. And that my personal approach is to refine myself do those things that are necessary for my family, and the universe has provided me the responsibility for all those beings to provide the love and nurture that they need. But at the same time, to cut out a little bit of space, time for myself to refine my nature and to explore what's going on. And I will leave you with one story, not verifiable, but if we were to just take it at face value, I know an individual who is so advanced spiritually that this individual has some of the siddhis, the powers that are talked about in the yogic tradition. And one of these powers is the ability to go out into the forest and create from that person's mind a golden palace or a hamburger or a fish, any number of things. This individual has demonstrated this power to me, and while overwhelming initially, there's one key component to that, and that is that the minute that the millisecond that this individual stops projecting that key energy into that reshaping of the illusion of reality, that part of the illusion reverts back to the templates of universal consciousness. I sure hope this makes sense as I explain it. So thus, it is a function of the amount of key energy that one can manipulate internally that allows the cities to exist. They don't exist as superpowers, for instance, when one can just jump up and fly like Superman at any given time. In our real understanding of reality, the power exists only because you've got that key charged up within you. Your battery is full, so to speak, and that you need to be cognizant of how much of that energy one uses and to also do those things that are necessary to recharge that battery. And thus we come back to the various practices that I'm engaged in, which all lead towards the very fixation of the point, again, goes back to first century China and the arrival of the indigenous Taoist religion, which is not really a religion, but is a scientific understanding, and what was known as the Hui Ming Ching. And it is that process described in that book, Hui Ming Ching, and you can get a good translation by Eva Wong off of Amazon.com, and it is that process that describes what Buddha went through in becoming a Tathagata, which is to say that form of enlightened being that he is. I think that this particular unique period of confluences, which we call time, provides support for any individual that should choose to charge their key battery and then go out and play with that energy. End of statement. And thank you very much, by the way. Very, very engaging.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Cliff. One last question. Is it okay that we can post this in the zone? Can you hear me still?
Yes, I can hear you still. I have no problem with that whatsoever. Please go ahead and post. End of statement.
Thank you very much, Cliff. Everyone here thanks you very, very much, okay?
Well, bye all. I'm going to go down and get my coffee now. Thank you. End of call.